Hello and welcome to this exploring session looking at the Lord Mayor's Show. Today we are looking at Lord Mayor's shows from 1631 and 1632, and we're diving into some Thomas Heywood. We haven't, I don't think we've touched on any Heywood pageants so far. Hopefully you've watched some of these videos before, as the Lord Mayor's Show in the 16th, 17th century has a nice circular route, which we've talked about before. I will throw a map up later on to give you an idea of what's going on. It's a fascinating piece of civic pageantry going on in London, starting at the Guildhall, sauntering around, and then primarily processing along Cheapside. We are looking for our two pageants by Thomas Heywood. We have looked at some Heywood before in his playwriting capacity. We have more to come. But today, this is our initial foray into his works, which dominate the 1630s in terms of pageant writing. And so today we have in the room reading with us, we have Angela. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm Angela, increasingly long-haired, from London.
And we also have Rachel. Rachel, introduce yourself to the viewers at home.
Hi, I'm Rachael Nicole, actor in New Jersey. Meow meow.
And I'm not sure whether also has cat in tow, but joining us, Liza. Do introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Liza from London. I will do my very best to provide a cat.
We are usually quite cat-heavy for the civic pageant sessions. On cue, Tracey, introduce yourself and your furry friend.
Hi, this is Millie, and I'm Tracey, and we are in Bath.
And Eric, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Eric. I do not have a cat indoors, but that's because I am a cat. Meow.
Excellent. And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I will be trying to keep everything moving forward, and occasionally I will turn into a graphic outlining the route of the pageants themselves. Now, the last time you were here, it was 1629, but we don't have a show for 1630. Tracey, do we know any reason why we don't have a pageant? Is it just simply lost, or was there a thing?
No, there doesn't seem to have been a thing. I'm just. It's not a year that I'm very familiar with, but I think it must have been a plague year.
Okay.
Most sailors were the company. Robert Ducey.
Okay, so we're going to skip 1630 because we have nothing. And we're going to go to 1631, and I'm going to ask Liza to read the opening bump. There's two, the opening bump and also the two dedications that Heywood does. He does two dedications, one after the other. So if you could dedicate this to Thomas Heywood, that would be lovely, Liza.
London's Jus Honorarium, expressed in sundry triumphs, pageants, and shows at the initiation or entrance of the Right Honourable George Whitmore into the mayoralty of the famous and far-renowned city of London. All the charge and expense of the laborious projects and objects both by water and by land being the sole undertaking of the Right Worshipful the Society of the Haberdashers. Redeunt Spectacula, printed at London by Nicholas Oakes, 1631. To the Right Honourable George Whitmore, Lord Mayor of this renowned metropolis, London. Right Honourable, it was the speech of a learned and grave philosopher, the tutor and counsellor to the Emperor Gratianus, pulchrius multo parari quam creari nobilem. More fair and famous it is to be made than to be born noble, for that honour is to be most honoured which is purchased by merit, not crept into by descent. For you, whose goodness hath made you thus great, I make my affectionate presentment of this annual celebration, concerning which, without flattery be it spoken, there is nothing so much as mentioned, much less enforced, in this your Jus Honorarium, which rather cometh not short than any way exceedeth the hope and expectation which is now upon you. And therefore worthily was your so free election, without either emulation or competitorship, conferred upon you. Since of you it may be undeniably spoken that none ever in your place was more sufficient or able, any cause whatsoever shall be brought before you more truly to discern, being apprehended more advisedly to dispose, being digested more maturely to dispatch. After this short tender of my service unto you, I humbly take my leave with this sentence borrowed from Seneca: Decet timere magistratum at plus diligi. Your lordships in all observance, Thomas Heywood. To the right worshipful Samuel Cranmer and Henry Pratt, the two sheriffs of the honourable city of London lately elected, right worshipful. The chief magistrates next unto the Lord Mayor are the two sheriffs. The name sheriff implieth as much as the reeve and governor of a shire, for reeve is grave count or earl, for so saith Master Verstegen. And these were of like authority with the censors, who were reputed in the prime and best rank among the magistrates of Rome. They were so-called cessendo, of ceasing, for they set a rate upon every man's estate, registering their names and placing them in a fit century. A second part of their office consisted in the reforming of manners, as having power to inquire into every man's life and carriage. The emblem of which authority was their Tirgula Sacrosancti, Tirgula Censoria, borne before them. They are thy others resembled to the tribunes of the people, and these are called Sacrosancti, whose persons might not be injured, nor their names in any way scandalized, for whosoever was proved to be a delinquent in either was held to be homo sacer, an excommunicated person, and he that slew him was not liable unto any judgment. Their houses stand open continually, not only for hospitality, but for a sanctuary to all such as were distressed. Neither was it lawful for them to be absent from college one whole day together during their year. Thus you see how near the dignities of this city come near to these in Rome, when it was most flourishing. The first sheriffs that bore the name and office of this in this city were Peter Duke and Thomas Neal, anno 1209. The novicini, now in present, Samuel Cranmer and Henry Pratt, anno 1631. To whom I direct this short remembrance. Your worship's ever attendant, Thomas Heywood.
Well done there, Liza. That was the opening bump on the print edition of this text. It isn't directly applicable to what's going on in the performance, but it gives us a sense of the kind of pitch that Heywood's giving here to both the Right Honourable George Whitmore as well as to the two sheriffs as well. So what do we know about George Whitmore and what do we know about the haberdashers?
Well, the haberdashers are a company we've come across a number of times in this series because they have a significant number of Lord Mayors in the period, and the next one is also them. It sounds like Whitmore is obviously wealthy, well connected, as they tended to be. He was related by marriage to William Craven, who'd been the Lord Mayor in 1611. This is the 1630s, so things start to get a bit more politicised, actually. He was a massive royalist, unlike his successor. He hosted Charles, apparently, in his own home, and was very firmly in favour of the royalist cause. During the Civil War period, he was imprisoned by the parliamentarians as a delinquent because of his sort of political preferences.
Yes, and we've had, I think the last session or the session before, we had mention of, if the Queen comes, what do we do? Where do we put her? And I'm just interested in that slight interesting shift and what might be going on there. Quite a lot of stuff about sort of the establishment of offices and how they compare with Rome and the grandeur of Rome and things going on there. We don't need to linger on this opening material, but does anyone have any thoughts they want to throw in at this time? Rachel, then Eric.
Just like a question, because I just think it's very interesting. In the first thing to George Whitmore, that he says, talking about his merit and that he's, implying that he's made? Did he? How did he make his money? And I don't know. Is there some sort of beginning of change of thought here? And I don't know. What was this controversial because it doesn't seem like it's in line with I don't know, having a king that a guy comes up and is going over rank or something. And how did George Whitmore make his money?
It kind of is and it isn't really. I mean, technically the London mayoralty works a bit like the American presidency, which is that anybody who's sufficiently qualified can work his way up to that position. Whitmore wasn't from a kind of an aristocratic background or anything, but he was clearly very, very wealthy. The kind of sentiments there is that we saw those with Webster and also with Middleton too, this idea that within the context of the city, there are different kinds of merit, different kinds of value. It's not necessarily casting aspersions on the king, although nobody in the city was very keen on Charles lots of the time because he was such a extortionist. But no, I think it's much more about saying, this is our arena, this is how people make it through to the top.
Liza briefly, and then Eric.
Briefly, we've seen other Lords Mayor who were given that they have to be from one of the guilds. We've seen other ones who were gentry or artisans' sons rather than nobility, right?
Yes, that indeed did happen.
I was just my remark was just like sort of because we've seen like Monday's introductions where he kind of goes, yes, I told them this, but they did not believe me, but they are wrong. It's much more polite in this, I feel.
Yes, there is a certain pattern to this text, but we will go on. Angela, could I ask you to read the opening sort of throat clearing after the dedications, which I think will follow on similar themes before we start getting to some pageants. So I'll ask you to read on until we get to Upon the Water.
When Rome was erected, at the first establishing of a commonweal, Romulus, the founder of it, instituted a prime officer to govern the city, who was called Praefectus Orbis, that is, the prefect of the city, whose uncontrollable authority had power not only to examine, but to determine all causes and controversies, and to sit upon and censure all delinquents, whether their offences were capital or criminal. Intra centesimum lapidem, within 100 miles of the city. In process of time, the Tarquins being expelled and the prime sovereignty remaining in the councils. They, by reason of their foreign employments, having no leisure to administer justice at home, created two chief officers. The one they called Praetor Urbanus, mayor, and the other Peregrinus. The first had his jurisdiction in and over the city. The other exercised his authority merely upon strangers. The name praetor is derived from praesendo or preundo, from priority of place, which, as a learned Roman author writ, had absolute power over all public and private affairs, to make new laws and abolish old without control or contradiction. His authority growing to that height that whatsoever he decreed or censured in public was called jus honorarium. The first on whom this dignity was conferred in Rome was Spurfurius Camillus, the son of Marcus. And the first praetor or Lord Mayor appointed to the government of the honourable city of London was Henry Fitz-Alwyn, advanced to that dignity by King John anno 1210. So much for the honour and antiquity of name and place. I proceed to the shows.
Yes, so it's similar themes and concerns that were in the dedications there. I think we will proceed to the shows. Hold on to any thoughts you have on some of that. We're going to start with the show on the water. So we've sauntered down from the Guildhall in the morning in procession, and at the water there may be some sort of show presentation thing that the mayor gets to look at. So what is it that George Whitmore hears and sees? I'll ask Rachel to read the opening description, and I'll ask Eric to read the speech that accompanies it afterwards.
Upon the water are two craggy rocks placed directly opposite of that distance that the barges may pass betwixt them. These are full of monsters, as serpents, snakes, dragons, etc., some spitting fire, others vomiting water. In the bases thereof, nothing to be seen, but the sad relics of shipwreck in broken barks and split vessels, etc. The one is called Scylla, the other Charybdis, which is situated directly against Messana, Scylla against Rhegium, and whatsoever ship that passeth these seas, if it keep not the middle channel, it is either racked upon the one or devoured by the other. Medio tutissimus ibit. Upon these rocks are placed the sirens, excellent both in voice and instrument. They are 3 in number: Telsipio, Fligi, Aglausi, or as others will have them called, Parthenope, skillful in music, Leucosia upon the wind instrument, Ligni upon the harp. The moral intended by the poets that whosoever shall lend an attentive ear to their music is in great danger to perish. But he that can warily avoid it by stopping his ears against their enchantment shall not only secure themselves, but be their ruin. This was made good in Ulysses, the speaker, who by his wisdom and policy not only preserved himself and his people, but was the cause that they from the rocks cast themselves headlong into the sea. In him is personated a wise and discreet magistrate.
Behold, great magistrate, on either hand, sands, shelves, and certes, and upon them stand 2 dangerous rocks, your safety to engage, boasting of naught save shipwreck, spoil, and strange. This Scylla, that Charybdis, both dangerous both, placed in the way you row to take your oath. Yet though 1,000 monsters yawn and gape to engurge, and swallow you, there's way to escape. Ulysses by his wisdom founded, steer you by his compass, and the way lies clear. Will you know how? Look upward then, and sail by the sign Libra, that celestial scale in which some write the sun at his creation first shone. And it is to these times relation of divine justice. Its injustice shined, so do you so, Lord, and be like it divined. You even keep the even channel and be neither swayed to the right hand nor left, and so evade malicious envy, never out of action, smooth-visaged flattery, and black-mouthed distraction, sedition, whisperings, murmurings, private hate, all ambushing the godlike magistrate. About these rocks and quicksands sirens haunt. One sings connivance, the other would enchant with partial sentence, and a third ascribes in pleasing tunes a right to gifts and bribes, sweetening the ear and every other sense that place and office may with these dispense. But though their tunes be sweet and shrill their notes, they come from foul beasts and imposthumed throats. Sea monsters they be styled, but much, nay more, 'tis to be doubted, they frequent the shore. Yet like Ulysses, do but stop your ear to their enchantments, with an heart sincere, they failing to endanger your estate, will from the rocks themselves precipitate. Proceed then in your blessed inauguration, and celebrate this annual ovation, whilst you nor this way nor to that way lean, but shun the extremes to keep the golden mean. This glorious city Europe's chiefest minion, most happy in so great a king's dominion, into whose charge this day you invest, shall her in you, and you in her make blessed.
And thus ends that first show by Upon the Water. So they've, I brought the map up, gone down from the Guildhall down to Three Cranes, and they're at the waterside. And yeah, this is quite elaborate. We haven't had that much detail on some of these water shows, so there's really nice to have quite a detailed one. Tracey, you're holding something up with intent.
Can you see that?
Vaguely.
It's a monster spitting fire. It's from the Netherlands, from the 1630s actually. Funnily enough, a royal entry into Ghent, and I think it's a very similar kind of device to what Christmas Heywood did for the water show.
Because it's this idea that we've got a channel with rocks side by side that you have to steer the middle course, and we've got these monsters spitting fire or others vomiting water. What a lovely way of putting it. Water cannon and fire. We like these things. We like pyrotechnics. We like the slight possibility that something terrible will go wrong. Thoughts from the room, Rachel?
I was gonna ask if the thing vomiting water, if it could be a water pump or something, just, and then some sort of contraption to look like a monster around it, just spitting water.
Yeah, it does seem to be some sort of fire hose sort of system. Yeah. We do get a speech explicating what's going on. So Ulysses personating a wise and discreet magistrate. I don't know how you personate the discreet, but other thoughts on this water show before they all head off on their barges for the actual swearing in at Westminster. Eric,
it's very, very elaborate. I mean, just like sort of you've got dragons, you've got snakes, you've got serpents, and then you've got all that stuff. And you've got Scylla, Charybdis, and then you have the sirens, who of course have to have excellent voices. And it's just like, okay, there's a lot going on here. And then you've got Ulysses, who has to be heard above all this. It kind of, there's a part of me going, that's probably why it rhymes, so it can be heard over the shenanigans going on.
Yeah. There is a way of structuring these things so that they can be moderately heard by at least the Lord Mayor, if close enough. This is a very elaborate and playful, and that doesn't mean to say that we haven't had this kind of activity in other water pageants before. We don't have that many examples, as we don't have nearly as many as we have of the stuff going on the land. So, but it's lovely to have it. We have had water cannons before, I think, on land in one pageant. So it's not an entirely unusual thing. Any other thoughts before we go into the next? We'll run the next two shows on the land into each other. So any thoughts before I do that, Liza?
I like that Scylla and Charybdis represent these moral hazards of connivance and bribes. I hope the Lord Mayor wasn't of a disposition to take the fact that the first show was about, hey, don't take bribes and don't connive, like, personally. Just saying, yes, your nobility is very great. Don't take bribes.
Yeah, yes, they're not necessarily always as pointed as that. They're more along the lines of, you are noble and wise and will do all the right things and look after people, won't you? But don't be corrupt. Nice to have. Angela.
I like also that it's that the only way to travel through that is the via media. Basically, it doesn't use that phrase; it uses another one. But that is a huge kind of moral compass for everything at this time, isn't it? The religion, the politics, for everything. So he's making that point as well.
Yeah, just think how awful it would have been if they the boatman lost control of where they're going. That wouldn't look good, would it? Oh, no, he's crashed into the sirens. Oh.
Yeah, damn those singers with excellent voices. It's it's an internet theory that the sirens actually wrecked ships because they were angry at them for interrupting choir practice.
Yeah, I think that's a highly plausible thing. We're going to go on to the land shows. So they've, as I say, gone on barges, swearing in at Westminster. They've come back again, alighted just slightly south of St Paul's, and heading up. This first one seems to be in the Paul's churchyard, so we're going to get a sense of where things are going. I'm going to ask Rachael to describe this first show by land. I'll ask Liza to be time. And then for the next show, if I could ask Eric to read the description and Angela to be London, the personification of London. And we'll see how far we get with that before we pause for the third show. But I think we'll do 2 shows back to back, see what's going on. So we're around Paul's churchyard. Rachel, take it away.
The first show by land, presented in Paul's churchyard, is a green and pleasant hill, adorned with all the flowers of the spring, upon which is erected a fair and flourishing tree, furnished with variety of fair and pleasant fruit, under which tree, and in the most eminent place of the hill, sitteth a woman of beautiful aspect, apparelled like summer, her motto, Civitas Bene Gubernata, a city well governed. Her attendants, or rather associates, are 3 damsels habited according to their quality, and representing the three theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity. Amongst the leaves and fruits of this tree are inserted diverse labels with several sentences expressing the causes which make cities to flourish and prosper, as the fear of God, religious zeal, a wise magistrate, obedience to rules, unity, plain and faithful dealing with others of the like nature. At the foot of the hill sitteth old Time, and by him his daughter Truth, with this inscription, Veritas est temporis filia. Truth is the daughter of Time, which Time speaketh as followeth.
Non nova sunt semper, et quod fuit ante relictum est fitque quod haud fuerat. If time, some say, have here been oft in view, yet not the same old time is each day new, who doth the future locked up hours enlarge to welcome you to this great city's charge. Time, who hath brought you hither, grave and great, to inaugure you in your praetorium seat, thus much with grief doth of himself profess, nothing's more precious and esteemed less. Yet you have made great use of me to aspire this eminence by desert, when in full choir aves and acclamations with loud voice meet you on all sides, and with time rejoice. This hill, that nymph apparelled like the spring, these graces that attend her, everything, as fruitful trees, green plants, flowers of choice smell, all emblems of a city governed well, which now must be your charge. The labels here, mixed with the leaves, will show what fruit they bear. The fear of God, a magistrate discreet, justice and equity, when with these meet obedience unto rulers, unity, plain and just dealing, zeal and industry, in such blessed symptoms, when these shall agree, cities shall like perpetual summers be. You are now general, do but bravely lead, and doubtless all will march as you shall tread. You are the captain, do but bravely stand to oppose vice. See, all this goodly band now in their city liveries will apply themselves to follow where your colors fly. You are the chief. Defend my daughter Truth, and then both health and poverty, age and youth, will follow this your standard, to oppose error, sedition, hate, the common foes. But pardon Time, grave lord, who speaks to thee, as well what thou now art as ought to be. Then Time maketh a pause, and taking up a leafless and withered branch, thus proceedeth. See you This withered branch, by time o'ergrown, a city's symbol ruined and trod down, a tree that bare bad fruit, dissimulation, pride, malice, envy, atheism, supplantation, ill government, profaneness, fraud, oppression, neglect of virtue, freedom to transgression. Obedience here with power did disagree, all which, fair London, be still far from thee.
And we move slightly further down Cheapside for the second show by land.
The second show by land is presented in the upper part of Cheapside, which is a chariot. The two beasts that are placed before it are a lion passant and a white unicorn in the same posture, on whose backs are seated two ladies, the one representing justice upon the lion, the other mercy upon the unicorn. The motto which justice beareth is Rebelles protero. The inscription which mercy carrieth is Imbelles protego. Herein is intimated that by these types and symbols of honor represented in these noble beasts belonging to His Majesty, all other inferior magistracies and governments, either in commonweals or private societies, receive both being and supportance. The prime lady, seated in the first and most eminent place of the chariot, represents London, behind whom and on either side diverse others of the chief cities of the kingdom take place, as Westminster, York, Bristol, Oxford, Lincoln, Exeter, and so on. All these are to bed distinguished by their several escutcheons. To them, London being speaker, directeth the first part of her speech as followeth.
You noble cities of this generous isle, may these my two each ladies ever smile, justice and mercy on you. You we know are come to grace this our triumphant show, and of your courtesy the hand to kiss of London, this fair land's metropolis. Why, sister cities, sit you thus amazed, if to behold above you windows glazed with diamonds instead of glass, stars hither sent, this day to deck our lower firmament? Is it to see my numerous children round encompass me, so that no place is found in all my large streets empty? My issue spread in number more than stones whereon they tread. To see my temples, houses, even all places with people covered as if tiled with faces. Will you know whence proceeds this fair increase, this joy? The fruits of a continued peace, the way to thrive, to prosper in each calling, the weak and shrinking states to keep from falling. Behold, my motto shall all this display. Read and observe it well. Serve and obey. Obedience, though it humbly doth begin, it soon augments unto a magazine of plenty. In all cities 'tis the ground, and doth like harmony in music sound. Nations and commonweals by it alone flourish. It incorporates many into one, and makes unanimous peace, content, and joy, which pride doth still insidiate to destroy. And you, grave lord, on whom right honour calls, both born and bred in the circuit of my walls, by virtue and example have made plain how others may like eminence attain. Persist in this blessed concord. May we long that cities to this city may still throng to view my annual triumphs, and so grace those honoured praetors that supply this place.
And next, after the chariot are borne, the two rocks, Scylla and Charybdis, which before were presented upon the water, reusing props from earlier. Upon the top of the one stands a sea lion, upon the other a mermaid or sea nymph, the sirens and monsters being in continual agitation and motion, some breathing fire, others spouting water. I shall not need spend much time in the description of them, the work being sufficiently able to commend itself. So we'll pause there. We've gone from Paul's Churchyard. We've moved about a third of the way up Cheapside. We've had a beautiful hill covered in with a tree and lovely flowers, and a really miserable time. Really, really judgy. And a tree with lots of helpful expressions on them, like fear of God. And things, and then a second show we get a lion and a unicorn, and a chariot with London and various other cities as well. And then of course we have the return of, I assume, the very popular fire-breathing monsters and the water-spouting monsters, and I can see there's a lot of fun to be had out of that. Thoughts in the room about these two shows? I have to say I'm really enjoying this show so far. Times. The heaviness of time notwithstanding. Liza.
Well, yeah, I mean, I quite like Time's speech where Time says something like, I'm scrolling to find it, nothing's more precious and esteemed less. I mean, that's kind of a truism for Time to say. But also, I'm finding the symbolism of the tree with the labels in it of virtues a little bit, I don't know, maybe heavy-handed, saying, instead of fruits it has little labels saying the fear of God and religious zeal, plain and faithful dealing, and I don't know. I don't know if this symbolism is quite as effective as some we've seen, although it's certainly more easily understandable than some we've seen.
Yeah, and it is. We have had a hill, we have had trees before. This one feels like the slightly cheaper element of the pageant.
This according to my friend Richard Rowland, whose book I highly recommend. This particular part of Heywood's first show is modelled very closely on Elizabeth's coronation entry from 1559. And this and those kind of exhortations to various kind of behaviours is kind of Heywood sort of pitching his flag on the hill of Protestantism, really, especially in the context of a king whose allegiance to Protestantism was, shall we say, flimsy. It's a very strongly kind of almost stridently sort of Protestant meritocratic kind of thing that's coming across here.
Mm. And yes, just a note that we haven't been sponsored in any way or have any affiliations with the book in question. We just recommend it as a useful tool for your home research. It is available now. Angela.
That's really, really interesting because another aspect of the London speech, which really is striking, is this huge emphasis on obedience. And so we know that, Charles has decided to not have parliaments anymore. So he's ruling literally through his own authority. And it's very interesting to see this big statement about obedience, and that's how everybody thrives, because we all just stick together and do as we're told and work as one unity, especially with all those other cities. And I don't know, I mean, I've not noticed any other cities being invited to this show before. They've occasionally had foreign visitors from far flung lands, but that seems to me real big political statement, which, as Tracey was telling us, the mayor is kind of also a big a supporter of Charles and what he's trying to do. So that just seems remarkable. Or maybe it's just come out of Elizabeth's coronation, because it's also very royalist in that way. So it'd be interesting to know.
Diverse others of the chief cities of the kingdom, are they significations of those chief cities, or are they how do you demonstrate Exeter? It's a question I often ask myself.
Well, presumably you have someone attired in probably female clothing, holding a little model of their city with some kind of label being like Exeter.
Well, they've all got those scutcheons. So every every city's got a coat of arms, so they've got the coat of arms. But I bet they do. They bet they all wear a cathedral on their head, because that's the whole point of a city, isn't it? It's got a cathedral.
We did have one show which referenced Oxford very with the story about seeing a tree in their dream.
And there was a very elaborate set for that as well. Yeah.
Thomas White, Merchant Taylors. I mean, Heywood is a Cambridge man, in case you hadn't guessed.
Eric.
I was just going to draw attention to the the lion and the unicorn, which I'm guessing is relevant to the coat of arms of the king, which is the lion, presumably England, and the unicorn being Scotland, or at least because if I remember correctly, the unicorn is the national animal of Scotland. So yeah.
Yeah, we keep them in secret places. Only your genuine Scot is allowed to actually visit the unicorn pens. It's not allowed. For anyone else,
you must be pure of heart and offer them a deep fried Mars bar.
Yeah. Anyway, we will go on to the third show, and we may even keep on to the end of this particular show. I'll ask Angela to start, and then at some point you will hear the sound of a bell, and I'll pass it over to Liza.
The third show, by land presented near unto the great cross in Cheapside, beareth the title of the Palace of Honour, a fair and curious structure, arched and terraced above, on the top of which standeth Honour, a glorious presence, and richly habited. She in her speech directed to the Right Honourable the Lord Mayor, discovers all the true and direct ways to attain unto her, as first a king, either by succession or election, a soldier by valour and martial discipline, a churchman by learning and degrees in schools, a statesman by travel and language and so on, a Lord Mayor by commerce and traffic both, by sea and land, by the enriching of the kingdom and honour of our nation. The Palace of Honour is thus governed: industry controller, his word negotiator; charity steward, the word miserior; liberality treasurer, the word largior; innocence and henchman, the words devotion; patior, precor, and so of the rest. And according to this Palace of Honour is fashioned not only the management of the whole city in general, but the house and family of the Lord Mayor in particular.
And we'll pass over to Liza. Continue this description.
Before, in the front of this palace, is seated Saint Catherine, the lady and patroness of this worshipful society, of whom I will give you this short character. The name itself imports in the original omnis ruina, which, as some interpret it, is as much as to say the fall and ruin of all the works of the devil. Others derive the word from catena, a chain wherein all chief virtues and graces are concatenated and linked together. So much for her name. For her birth, she was lineally descended from the Roman emperors, the daughter of Costus, the son of Constantine, which Costus was crowned king of Armenia, for Constantine, having conquered that kingdom, grew enamored of the king's daughter by whom he had issue. This Costus, who after succeeded his grandfather. Constantine, after the death of his first wife, made an expedition from Rome, and having conquered this kingdom of Great Britain, he took to his second wife, Helena, which Helena was she that found the cross upon which the Saviour of the world was crucified, etc., etc. Costus dying whilst Catherine was yet young, and she being all that time living in Famagosta, a chief city because she was there proclaimed and crowned, was called Queen of Famagosta. She lived and died a virgin and a martyr under the tyranny of Maxentius, whose empress, with many other great and eminent persons, she had before converted to the faith. So much for her character.
And her speech to the Lord Mayor is as followeth, and I'll ask Rachel, could you be Catherine, please?
I, Catherine, long since sainted for true piety, the lady patroness of this society, a queen, a virgin, and a martyr, all, my attributes invite you to this hall, called Honor's place, nor is this my wheel, blind Fortune's emblem, she that makes to reel, kingdoms and common wheels all turning round, some to advance and others to confound. Mine is the wheel of faith, always in motion, steadfast in hope and constant in devotion. It imitates the sphere's swift agitation, orbicularly still moving to salutation. That's to the primus motor, from whom flows all goodness, virtue, there true honor grows, which, if you will attain it, must be your care, grave magistrate, instated as you are, to keep this corolar action in your charge, to curb the oppressor, the oppressed to enlarge, to be the widow's husband, the orphan's father, the blind man's eye, the lame man's foot, so gather a treasure beyond value by your place, more than earth's honor, true celestial grace. Aim first at that, what other honors be. Honor herself can best instruct that she.
At that word she pointeth upward to a glorious presence which personates honour in the top of the palace, who thus secondeth St. Catherine's speech. And I'll ask Angela, could you be the personification of honour, please?
The way to me, though not debarred, yet it is difficult and hard. If kings arrive to my perfection, 'tis by succession or election. When fortitude doth action grace, the soldier then with me takes place. When study, knowledge, and degree makes scholars eminent here with me, they are listed with the honoured. And the traveller, when many a land he hath perused for language and much knows, a great respected statesman grows. So you and such as you, grave lord, who wear this scarlet, use that sword, collar, and cap of maintenance. These are no things that come by chance or got by sleeping, but averse from these I am gained by care, commerce, the hazarding of goods and men, to pirates, rocks, shells, and tempest, when you through a wilderness of seas, dangers of wrack, surprise, disease, make new discoveries for a lasting story of this our kingdom's fame and nation's glory. Thus is that collar and your scarlet worn, and for such cause the sword before you borne. They are the emblems of your power, and here, though curbed within the limit of 1 year, yet managed as they ought by your endeavour, shall make your name as new, honoured for ever. Unto which palace of peace, rest and bliss, supply of all things, where naught wanting is, would these that shall succeed you know the way, 'tis plain, God the King serve and obey.
And I'll ask Liza to lead us into the final elements of the pageants.
I cannot here forget that in the presentment of my papers to the master, wardens, and committees of this right worshipful company of the haberdashers, at whose sole expense and charges all the public triumphs of this day's solemnity, both by water and land, were celebrated, nothing here devised or expressed was in any way foreign unto them. But of all these my conceptions, they were as able to judge as ready to hear, and to direct, as well as to censure. Neither was there any difficulty which needed a comment, but as soon known as shown, and apprehended as read, which makes me now confident of the best rank of the citizens, that as to the honour and strength both of the city and kingdom in general, they exercise arms in public, so to the benefit of their judgments and enriching of their knowledge, they neglect not the study of arts and practice of literature in private, so that of them it may be truly said that they are tam mercurio quam Marte periti. I proceed now to the last speech at night, in which Ulysses, at the taking leave of his lordship at the gate, useth this short commemoration. of all that hath been included in the former pageants, pointing to them in order, the manner thereof thus.
So we've gone from that third pageant midway through Cheapside. They've having witnessed Honor and Catherine. They've all gone to have some food. They've gone to St Paul's. They've had a little bit of a service there, and now the Lord Mayor's making his way home. And this is the Lordship at his gate, and Ulysses returns. So I'll ask Eric to read Ulysses here before we close this pageant.
Night grows, inviting you to rest. Prepare to rise tomorrow to a whole year's care. Envy still waits on honor, then provide Ulysses' wisdom may still be your guide, to steer you through all dangers. Husband time that this day brings you to a place sublime. By the supporter of his daughter Truth, this ancient city in her pristine youth, your sword may reestablish, and so bring her still to flourish. That like that lasting spring that London in whose circuit you were bred, and born therein to be the chief and head, drawn by these two beasts in an equal line, may in your mercy and your justice shine. So honor who this day you did invite unto her palace bids you thus good night. No following day, but add to your renown, and this your charge with numerous blessings crown.
I have forborne to spend much paper in needless and impertinent deciphering the work, or explaining the habits of the persons as being freely exposed to the public view of all the spectators. The main show, being performed by the most excellent in that kind, Master Jared Christmas, hath expressed his models to be exquisite, as having spared neither cost nor care, either in the figures or ornaments. I shall not need to point unto them to say, this is a lion, and that an unicorn, etc. For of this artist I may boldly and freely thus much speak, though many about the town may envy their work, yet with all their endeavour they shall not be able to compare with their work. I conclude with Plautus intigio, nam curiosus est nemo que non sit malvolius. Fini. What a wonderful way to finish that. I mean, I have to say generally about the layout of this particular printing. It is in order. It's relatively clear as a work. It is a shame that he doesn't point out that this is a lion and this is a unicorn. That we don't have a few more details where it'd be nice, because of course there's an assumption that the reader will have also seen the show or know the conventions, so that's a bit of a shame. But yeah, you get the impression there's a bit of shade at previous pageants there, isn't it, about the printings? You read a few in advance and went, yeah, I'm not writing mine like that. Liza.
Well, I mean, he's got the same designer as everyone before him has had, yeah, along those lines, he just has to drop in before that final speech that nothing here devised or expressed was any way foreign unto them. I just showed them all my concepts and they got it immediately, because I'm not doing any of these weird productions or conceptual stuff. I'm just putting labels in a tree or something.
Yeah, people want the lion and the unicorn and stuff, because that's what, and the sea monsters, because that's what we have every year, and they got him, didn't they?
Yeah. Although it is nice to have Ulysses at the end, sort of giving us a recap of everything we've seen. That ties the pageant together quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, he's pointing to them in order, so it's like and remember that one? Do you remember that from earlier? And it's still there. Yeah, that third pageant, which we haven't really talked about, Palace of Honour, with Catherine and Honour. Any thoughts from the room on that?
The company did have, the haberdashers had a model of St Catherine, which was on the barge for Lord Mayor's Day and other events. And there's a 1650s one still in the hall. So just slightly older, slightly younger than this one. And it was taken off the barge and then paraded around the streets. So it's entirely possible that became part of this show, or was just kind of carried along through the procession.
Yeah, I like that. Liza?
Yeah, there was a little discussion in the chat about which St. Catherine this was meant to be, because we have one St. Catherine who died martyred on a spiky wheel, and she always has a wheel with her. And the speech does reference a wheel, and I quite like all the metaphors it attaches to the wheel. That she says, it's not fortune's wheel that's blind in its whirling and throwing people up and down. Mine is the wheel of faith that moves the spheres, and it's like the primum mobile of the universe. And it's a cosmic wheel, man. It's a cosmic wheel. But then, was this the Catherine of Cyprus, or was it another Catherine? We were speculating about Catherine of Siena. Thoughts from the historians, maybe.
Because it does throw in a lot of detail suddenly, or lists and stuff in that section, which Angela, you battled valiantly with, but it's not the most riveting of descriptive material. That opening bit on there. There's a lot of stuff being thrown at us, which is sort of extra to the performance, as we often get in these.
I mean, I did think that Saint Catherine, was martyred by Constantine or by, kind of like an emperor. But whether or not she was in Siena or whether or not she was in Cyprus, not a clue. I just, so I just know that about St. Catherine. But St. Catherine of Siena may just be because Siena adopts her as their patron saint, as we do with St. George, who, of course, is not in the least bit from Great Britain. So I think these geographies don't apply to their actual histories. They apply to where they've been adopted. That's my thinking.
I'm liking the fact that we're starting to give Thomas Heywood a stoner personality in the way he's writing these things. I don't know if that's going to continue or whether that's just an interesting thing. I always like to start describing random things that don't necessarily have any reality. Eric?
I was just going to say that it's interesting also that we still have this mix of Christian... well, not idolatry, but symbolism, and like concepts with non-Christian stuff, like Ulysses.
We've had this through almost all of our the work that we've been doing from the sort of 50s to 60s onwards of this fascinating mix of references to which sometimes are uncomfortable and sometimes reinforce each other. And that play is still in place here.
That's what Christian humanism is. It's a mix of classicism and Christianity. I think that's why Tracey and her fellow English literature scholars call this the English Renaissance, because of that combining of those two things. Although I'm not sure if it's nearly over if it's 1631, is it?
Yeah, it's obviously amplified by the fact that Heywood is at pains to accentuate his high level of education at every opportunity.
Right. Eric, briefly, we're going to go on in a moment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like the Cyprus references are very, very, like the first one I did not expect, like, the Lefkosia being like the sort of capital city of Cyprus, and also Siren, apparently. And there's still, apparently, I looked this up, apparently they don't know whether the name is related to the Siren or not. Anyway, and but like the sort of Queen of Famagusta, that doesn't really make sense because if she lived and died a virgin and a martyr under the tyranny of Maxentius, Famagusta didn't exist at the time, or it was not called Famagusta. Definitely not by that point.
Right, so as ever, we are left sometimes with more questions than we have answers, but that is fine. We are leaving 1 October afternoon, and we're flying to another one. It's always October the 29th here, or usually or near as damn it. We're going into the next year. Time is travelling. We're going to 1632 now. And I'm going to say to Liza, before I ask you to read all the bump and the opening dedicatory stuff, is that you have permission to follow the Glass of Government ripcord. There are a lot of lists of names. If you want to skip to the end of any of the lists of names and get back into actual description, feel free to do so. I will not judge you.
It's true, but I am a Londoner, and you know these names are both fun to read and also I suppose they were considered significant, even though probably people have now forgotten about them. So I'll read as many as I can, without dying of boredom.
I give you the option. Yes.
Londini Artium et Scientiarum Scaturigo, or London's fountain of arts and sciences, expressed in sundry triumphs, pageants, and shows at the initiation of the Right Honourable Nicholas Rainton into the mayoralty of the famous and far-renowned city, London. All the charge and expense of the laborious projects, both by water and land, being the sole undertakings of the Right Worshipful Company of the Haberdashers. Written by Thomas Heywood, Redeunt Spectacula. Printed at London by Nicholas Oakes, 1632. To the Right Honourable Nicholas Rainton, Lord Mayor of this renowned metropolis, London. Right Honourable, concerning the dignity of your place and magnificence of your inauguration, the first equalling, the latter pre-selling all the famous magistracies in Christendom, I shall not much stand to dispute as being a maxim already granted. Yet one thing I cannot omit as most worthy remark, namely, how many of like judicature have borne the sword in this famous and flourishing city, who breathed their first air in the country of Lincoln, from whence you derive yourself, as Sir John Stockton, Mercer, born at Bratost, Lord Mayor 1470, Sir Nicholas Aldwyn, Mercer, born at Spalding, Lord Mayor 1499, Sir William Rennington, fishmonger at Boston, Lincolnshire, Mayor 1500, Sir William Foreman, haberdasher at Gainsborough, Lord Mayor 1538, Sir Henry Hobbershorns, merchant tailor at Waddingworth, Lord Mayor 1546, Sir Henry Amcoats, fishmonger at Astrup, Lincolnshire, Lord Mayor 1548, Sir John Langley, goldsmith at Althorp, Lord Mayor 1576, Sir John Allett, fishmonger at Limburg, Lord Mayor 1590, Sir George Bowles, grocer at Gosperton, Lord Mayor 1617, and now in present your honoured self, Nicholas Rainton, born at Hyington, Lord Mayor 1632. Not so many, having attained to the same dignity bred in any one county, the city of London excepted. Worthy observation it is also that at one time in the reign of Queen Elizabeth most of the prime officers of state were countrymen of the same county, as the Archbishop of Canterbury, Whitgift, the Lord High Treasurer of England, Lord Burleigh Cecil, the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal, Sir John Puckering, viz. Chamberlain and Chancellor of the Duchy, Sir Thomas Heneage, one of Her Majesty's Privy Council, the Lord Chief Justice Judge Ray, etc. Moreover, it may be justly spoken of you to your great reputation and honour that since the year 1209 from Henry Fitz Alwyn, the first Lord Mayor of this honourable city, and Peter Duke and Thomas Neal, the first sheriffs of the same, never had any magistrate a more general, free, and affectionate election, even to this present year 1632. Now time and your own demerit, right honourable, have raised you to this eminence and dignity. The universal eye and expectation of all men is upon you, who well know that a wise magistrate prefers consideration before conclusion, and according to the saying of King Agesilaus, magistrates who govern by just laws must strengthen them by good example, judge by providence, wisdom, and justice, and defend by power, care, and vigilance. And thus I humbly take my leave of your lordship with this sentence. Non sat est te tuum officium fecisse non si non id fama approbat. Your lordship's countryman and servant, Thomas Heywood. To the right worshipful Hugh Perry and Henry Andrews, the two sheriffs of the honourable city of London last elected. Right worshipful and in every way worthy, Your arms displayed at the front of this show approve your gentry, and your traffic and commerce being free merchant adventurers, testify to the world your noble profession as trading in the East Indies, Turkey, Italy, Spain, and France, etc., to the honor of our nation abroad, and singular profits redounding to the realm at home. Your more private employments heretofore, as well in furthering arts as encouraging arms, adding no common lustre to these offices unto which time and your own demerits have at this present called you. Then, as that public weal is most blessed and flourishing where the governors are as well beloved in their persons as feared in their places, so likewise it belongeth to all such as are in authority to steer themselves by the rule of Socrates, that is, to hear courteously, answer discreetly, consider seriously, and sentence impartially. But I presume not to advise where I rather desire to be instructed, shutting up my present service with that of Seneca, id facere laus est quod decet, non quod licet. Your worships to be commanded, Thomas Heywood.
And breathe. Well done. So, within all that, it's been a very affectionate election for Nicholas Rayton of the Haberdashers again. What do we know about Nick?
Here he is. Oh, a nice painting of him. You can probably tell that Heywood himself came from Lincolnshire. Just in case you're wondering. God. He's quite an interesting character, actually, Renton. He got put into the Tower in 1640 by Charles because he wouldn't give the King's officers the names of the members of his ward, which was Tower Ward, actually, who hadn't contributed towards a loan for the King. Loan. So yeah, he's quite a different kind of proposition to Whitmore. Clearly not a massive fan of Charles, I wouldn't imagine. And indeed, he was a kind of parliamentarian-minded kind of man, really. His house was 40 Hall up in Enfield, which is still there. So yeah, he is quite an interesting character, and he made a lot of money because, as Heywood himself says, he traded in textiles, and that's kind of where you can make some serious dosh. He wasn't a mercer, although he did mercery, but that, like David Eaton and all the rest of them, that's where the money really is, mercery.
Other thoughts from the room about it's mostly Bumf there, so I don't want to linger on it too much, but if anyone has anything they want to throw in at this time, feel free to do so. A lot of lists, just to say that he's quite nice. We're going to go into the opening throat clearing of this document, and we'll go into the show on the water. So I'll ask Angela to read the next bit, the general stuff about the show. Eric, if you could read the description of the show by water, and Rachel, if you could read the speech made on the water, that would be lovely. And that should get us to a point to pause. So, Angela, let's find out if there's anything we need to know about this particular show.
The title of the show is Scaturigo, the fountain and wellspring of all the liberal arts and sciences, or mysteries whatsoever, which, as they have been long since planted and encouraged, so they are at the time the more liberally watered, and therefore more plenteously enriched by their blessed mother and bountiful nurse, the most illustrious city of London. For the first, namely the arts and studies of the brain, how many grammar schools have been by her and her indulgent children erected through all or most of all the shires and counties of England, to the propagation and advancement of learning, to the furnishing of the academics with students, and from them the 4 flourishing kingdoms, now under the sword and sceptre of his most sacred majesty, with profound theologists, expert physicians, learned philosophers, skillful mathematicians, and so on. If any man desire to be further instructed in the number of their free schools, hospitals, almshouses, lectures, exercises, scarce to be numbered, with the names of the founders and the annual revenue still continued and daily enlarged for their perpetual maintenance, I refer them unto our English annals, where they may be plenteously satisfied. Neither can these few sheets of paper contain them, much rather require a volume. So much for the studies of the brain. Now, for all the other sciences, mysteries, trades, and manufactures, including as well merchants as mechanics, what city in Europe yieldeth more plenty, more variety, in so much that by reason of bartering, bargaining, trade, and commerce, besides the bus or exchange, daily thronged with merchants of all countries, the populous streets rather appear an open mart than an ordinary market. She not favouring and fostering her own natives only, but strangers and of all foreign nations whatsoever. Here they suck the milk of her breasts. Here they are fed, here cherished by this excellent city, and therefore neither impertinently nor improperly may she be styled Artium and Scientiarum inundans Scaturigo.
The show by water. It representeth Arion with his harp in his hands, riding upon the back of a dolphin. Behind him, for ornament, old Oceanus and Amphitrite, mounted upon 2 seahorses, holding each of them a staff and a banner, wherein are displayed the arms of the 2 sheriffs now in place. Of him it is thus commented. Arion was born in Methymnus, whom Perinthus, Ores, Gellius, and Herodotus pleased to name him Periander, for his excellent skill upon the harp, greatly delighted in. Dicarchus describeth him for a noble dithyrambic poet. He, having got great store of treasure, was desirous to cross from Corinth into Sicilia in Italy, to whom Apollo appears the night before his embarking in a dream, and willed him to attire himself in his robe and laurel, and to be ready in any danger to sing unto his harp, and not to fear anything. The next day, being far from shore, the mariners, having noticed what treasure he had aboard, he conspired amongst themselves to cast him into the sea, which he perceiving begged of them so much respite that, habited as he was, he might sing one funeral farewell to his harp, which granted. So sweet was his harmony that the dolphins came sporting about the ship, as much delighted with his music, among whom he cast himself, and they supported him and bore him back unto Corinth, where, having told this wonderment, the king graciously entertained him. Soon after, the same bark, being by a tempest driven into the same harbour, notice thereof being given unto the king, he strictly questioned them concerning Arion, and they affirmed him to be dead at sea, to which, when they had sworn, he caused Arion suddenly to appear before them, who, confounded with shame, were commanded to death. Apollo after translated Arion for his music, and the dolphin for his pity among the stars. Arion's speech directed to the river Thames, the first speech by water.
Fair Themesis, upon whose silver breast Arion with his dolphin now doth rest, how I admire thy glory, state, and pride, upon this solemn day thus beautified. Ganges renowned in all foreign lands, nor Tagus, boasting of her golden sands, can parallel thy riches, not Castor, famous for swans, nor Po, her clear-streamed sister, winding meander, nor yet Simois' flood, which fame saith at the Trojan siege ran blood, swift Rubicon, whose memory shall last, because it Caesar with his army passed, Coaspes, that almost girts Persia round, nor Issa by Darius death renowned, the Amazonian Thermedon, the Nile, that breeds in it the weeping crocodile, the Euphrates, the Volga, and the Rhine, nay, Jordan too, that waters Palestine, what Paris some, or Rome's swift Tiber be, the one a brook, the other a ditch to thee, And my crowned dolphin doth proclaim thee thus, thou'rt the choice darling of Oceanus. And if thou hast a genius, as 'tis guessed, all rivers have, know wherein thou'rt most blessed. Not that thy banks are so defenced and stable, nor within land thou'rt so far navigable, not for thy flux and reflux, ebbs and tides, or the rich meadows bordering round thy sides, not that being pleased thou'rt smooth, being angry, curled, nor thy rare bridge not equaled through the world, not for those goodly buildings reared so high to make thee live to perpetuity, not for thy spacious limits and extents, and yet all those unrivaled ornaments. But if I truly shall to thee commend that bliss wherein thou others dost transcend, behold this day the honor and the state of this thy great and godlike magistrate, not waited on by boats made of the trunks of canes or hollowed trees or petty lunks, or wanton gondolas, but barges strong and richly decked, who as they plow along thy breast with their smooth keels to make their way, see how the wind doth with their streamers play, how beautiful thy waves, how thronged thy shores, and what a music's when they strike their oars. To see them with grave magistrates so manned, powerful by sea and potent too by land, so many sciences and mysteries, distinguished into several companies in sundry bottoms, and each art and trade, known by flags and pendants here displayed, and London, which metropolis we call the fountain Scaturigo of them all. Grave praetor, now this day to be invested, the head of all these, pass on unmolested. In your great inauguration proceed, which to your lasting honor is decreed. In your return back you shall understand those triumphs that attend on you by land.
And then we have Perseus Andromeda with the sea monster are only showed upon the water, but their expression I refer to their place by land. So there were some additional things that were only there visually on the water, but they will be reused in some fashion on the land. There may be some text that accompanies that. Yes, a lengthy exposition on elements there, but the actual stuff happening on the water is actually fairly straightforward. We've got around with his harp riding on the back of a dolphin. We've got 2 seahorses. It's always nice to see seahorses. I think we have had them. Haven't had them for a while. I can't remember. When did we last have a dolphin? I can't remember when we last had a dolphin. Have we had a dolphin? I'm sure we've had a dolphin. I can't remember. Always nice to have, though. Any thoughts from the room?
There's dolphins in the 1616 Fishmonger's show.
I thought it'd been a while. That's not to say that they haven't appeared on the water at some point. As I say, we have less detail on what's going on the water than we have on the land. Any thoughts from the room about what we've had there? Rachel, you had a massive speech there. Thoughts?
Barring the fact that I don't know how to that I have trouble pronouncing some of these names of rivers, I think there's something very personable about the way Heywood writes these speeches. They're just I don't know how to say it beyond that, but I'm liking his verse a lot.
Other thoughts? There are some doozies in this script. So we're all doing our best. Angela.
I was interested in this great screed about arts, sciences, and all the kind of foundations, the educational foundations. And again, I've not noticed that before. Is that something that's specifically to do with this livery company? I know the haberdashers' schools exist, but of course they may have come much later. I don't know. Why particularly? Because it doesn't seem to then match what actually is happening in the show. In that it's a classical tale, but it's not, doesn't seem to match up.
It's an excellent question. I don't know, whether we've really leaned into setting up schools or the educational side of their bounty. Whether we've had that much in previous ones, Tracy.
Rainston was a governor of St Bartholomew's Hospital, but it's not really a school. I think it's as much Heywood's own interest actually as anything else.
Yes, the arts and studies of the brain. That's a lovely turn of phrase. I also just like the way that it just goes, so much for the studies of the brain. So much for that. We'll move on. I've made my point. I will now go to what we are supposed to be talking about.
I'm going to start using that one in conversation. So much for the studies of the brain.
So much of the studies.
Let's order some waffles.
Yes.
He keeps doing that. He keeps saying, so much for this. On to that. Kind of interesting. What a funny style.
Yeah, it's just flinging a so or now, and it's very conversational in that sense. Okay, we're going to go into some land shows unless anyone has additional thoughts. I don't know if Liza, you're just holding your hand by your mouth in a sort of pensive expression, or whether you have a thought.
I was in fact doing an impression of Mike Myers as Dr. Evil in the Austin Powers movies.
We always like to encourage that when we're doing Lord Mayor shows. So we'll go into the first show by land. I will ask Eric to do the initial text. Liza, if you could be St. Catherine. Coming up, there is a sense of deja vu all over again. We'll go into the second show as well, and I'll ask Rachel to read the introductory text for that, and I'll ask Angela to be Perseus, because that should go nicely. And then I'll read the third show because it's not very long. So, Eric, the first show by land, please.
Of which the first presentment is in Paul's churchyard, namely St. Catherine, patroness of this wonderful company, upon a lion bordered about with the sea waves, the arms of the haberdashers. She is crowned as being a queen, bearing a wheel in her hand, full of sharp cutting irons, the emblem of her martyrdom. Her attendants to beautify the platform are 4 virgins, humility the first, of which virtue Seneca thus speaketh, laus vera humili sepe contingit viro. The second truth, which scaleth the heavens, illustateth the earth, maintaineth justice, and governeth cities, kills hatred, cherisheth love, and discovereth treasons. The third, zeal, of which it is thus said, office is strengthened by zeal, and zeal maketh authority invincible. The fourth, constancy, according with that of Lucan, intrepidus quicunque datis mihi numina mortem accipia, all of which are necessary in a magistrate, as needful in a martyr. Of the etymology of her name, her royal birth, her breeding, her life and death in the last year's discourse, I gave a large character, and therefore proceed to her speech, which is as followeth.
Doth any wonder why St. Catherine, she, the patroness of this fair company, is mounted on a lion? Let such know that, being a queen, this kingly beast doth owe me duty by instinct. Besides, I come both with virginity and martyrdom, sainted moreover, and of these the least, able to tame the most insulting beast. But this is he the billows doth divide, and therefore justly on his back I ride. All these belonging to this worthy trade, the lion, sea waves, and the princely maid. That for the arms, note next what I display. In this my banner here, serve and obey. Rare moral in this motto, if well scanned, for kings are God's vicegerents, and command by sword and scepter, and by their good grace can prefer others both to power and place. As you this day behold this scarlet worn, and sword of justice thus in public borne, the cap of maintenance, collar of S's, which travellers in all their large progresses can in no city parallel. That's scite in the earth's division, known quadrupertite. So, whosoever shall himself oppose against this magistrate, as one of those the king deputes as chief, himself he brings to be a rebel to the King of Kings. Far be it, an arch traitor in that kind, mongst all these goodly companies combined in mutual love and league, should dare to appear in the fair progress of this praetor's year. Behold and view who my attendants be, constancy, zeal, truth, and humility. Be constant, then, unto this grave Lord Mayor, and the 2 shreves that his assistants are, chose by the public voice and Senate's doom as censors, as the tribunes were in Rome. Do it in zeal, in truth, and all submission, that there be found no cross interposition betwixt power and obedience. So shall all arts, mysteries, and trades mechanical thrive, prosper, and increase, so long as they honor the king, the magistrate obey.
The second show by land. This discovereth Andromeda, the daughter of King Cepheus, and Cassiopeia tied to a rock, and ready to be devoured by a sea monster, but rescued by Perseus, the son of Jupiter, and Danae, who is mounted upon a Pegasus, or winged horse, who is said to be bred from Neptune and Medusa, and in Helicon, a mountain in Boeotia, striking a stone with his hoof, opened that fountain called from him Hippocrene, much celebrated by the Muses. Perseus in one hand hath an arp, or crooked sword, and upon his left arm a shield with a Gorgon's head figured therein. In Perseus are comprehended all the prime virtues acquired in a noble magistrate. In Andromeda, chastity and innocence. I cannot here insist upon the history, but rather reference the reader to Ovid, who hath most elegantly expressed it, but come to the speech delivered by Perseus.
I, Perseus, Jove's son, born of heavenly steed, mounted upon a swift Pegasean steed, who with his hoof struck up the Muses' well, whence Euphysimias and high ruptures swell. As through the airy tract I forced my way, spied here the lovely maid Andromeda, chained to a rock, on whom so fate hath lowered, ready by a sea whale to be devoured. No, there is figured in this princely maid chastity and innocence, which divine aid is ready to assist still from above by one or other of the sons of love, of which denomination none more grace can claim than you, who are in power and place, and hold this day in chief. Then, Perseus-like, keep that your sword still drawn, ready to strike, making such monsters of your justice taste, who insidiate the innocuous and the chaste. Observe, grave sir, the arms and shield I bear, such as yourself and others ought to wear, both for defence and offence, and in me emblemed all those prime virtues that should be in persons of your power. My sword resembles unpartial justice, at which guilt still trembles. My winged horse, celerity and speed, in doing it, that no illegal deed may pass unscourged, and there be took no rest until relief be given to the oppressed. This shield that bears the Gorgon's head emblazed, upon whose snaky locks whoever gazed were turned to statues of cold, senseless stone, is that grave magistrate you now put on, whilst on your arm you wear this constant targe, bearing it yourself uprightly in your charge. As such as shall in malice or in pride your purple state detract from or deride, discover this before them. It hath power to freeze them into marble the same hour. strive you to imitate what I have done, since you this day are Perseus and Jove's son.
The third show by land. This is more mimical than material, and inserted for the vulgar, who rather love to feast their eyes than to banquet their ears. And therefore, though it be allowed place amongst the rest, as in all professions we see dunces amongst doctors, simple amongst subtle, and fools intermixed with wise men to fill up number, as doubting whether it can well apology for itself or no, at this time I afford it no tongue. Ooh, is, I think, the correct response there.
Heywood, you little bitch! I wonder if the haberdashers conspired with Mr. Christmas, the designer, to just go, look, can't we have a seahorse vomiting fire or something? And Heywood was like, fine, but I'm not putting it in the printed version.
That's how I've always read it. It's interesting, but and I've had long conversations with Richard Rowland about this passage, and he's absolutely convinced that Heywood is actually kind of being very sort of humorous, and it's all kind of a bit of in joke, and it's not meant in any kind of derogatory whatsoever. But I read it the way that you have, actually. Yeah, it's just can't be bothered with this stuff.
Yeah, this is not what I'm being paid for. I don't care.
But the shade of it all, I mean,
Yeah.
it's in this, the whole dunces amongst doctors, simple amongst subtle, and fools intermixed with wise men, like that. It's undeniably still true today, but it's not the kind of language you expect to find in a Lord Mayor's pageant, even in a stage direction. It's like, yeah, if you're a dumbass, you'll really like this part.
Yeah. Eric, did I see waving digits?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it had a lot of shade, and it reminded me of that line from the play that we're looking at in the afternoons, which is Downfall of the Earl of Huntingdon, of Robert of the Earl of Huntingdon, which it was, we saw this yesterday, where Little John just went, "We are not in love with being here, therefore we shall take our leave." It's like sort of mic drop. It just it feels very modern. Like, yes, there are idiots in every place, therefore I will not spend any time on this.
Yeah, Rachel.
His personality, I know he's being sharp-tongued here, but and how you said before that his style of writing is conversational, so much of his personality has come out in these two plays. And I don't know, just I've also put in the chat that the last where was it that there was the one, I don't know, there was one where he said like that, if you can't find a moral in this, like, read it again. But
yes, for more information, please reread. It's of course what we've got is St. Catherine again. For that the first show we've got St. Catherine. I mean, it is nice. It's a different speech. I mean, I was sitting there going, is any of this reused? No, it seemed. I did quite like St. Catherine sort of just going, anyone wondering why I'm riding on a lion? There's a good reason. It's quite cute actually for someone who's quite serious. Angela.
Well, I've just remembered that in the previous pageant, which he also, as Rachel points out, instructs you to go back to if you want to know a bit more about Catherine. But what he says in that is, there's no need for me to tell you what all these things mean, because it's pretty obvious when you look at them, because Christmas is so good. And you also get the feeling that he's been told that he better do a bit more explaining in this one, because he is doing more explaining in this one. So I think you're right, Liza. There's this whole sense in which he's been blooming told to sort that out.
Yeah, but it's. I think in the previous one it was about he's not going to describe the show per se. He doesn't go into the detail of what's going on in the show. Here he's giving us some backstory as to what the meaning and what these stories are, but he's not necessarily giving us any more detail about what's actually physically happening which is a bit of a shame, actually, because it would be quite nice to know. Previous pageants in the past, we've had quite a lot of detail on some shape or form as to how the pageant wagons are structured and where everyone's sitting. And these aren't telling us pretty much anything apart from the primary speakers.
Well, it's sort of a pageant of the imagination. We can imagine what it was that offended Heywood so much to have to put it in that he didn't dare talk about it. Was there like a tap dancing seahorse with the virtue of chastity throwing sweets to the populace or something?
Yeah, that's what it was. I think that we'll say that. Rachel.
No, I was just in the second show how he says if you don't, I rather refer the reader to Ovid. Like, if you don't understand this, go read a book.
Yeah, there's a lot of quoting going on. Very briefly, Angela, then Eric.
Well, I'm sorry, I keep harping back to this theme of royal absolutism, but we are getting total statements of royal absolutism here, where we talk about the king are God's vice-regents. I mean, it's literally that statement that's going to end up getting Charles I his head chopped off a little bit later on. So it's kind of amazing to see this stuff and creeping into a London's pageant, a civic pageant, is kind of amazing.
Yes, that's where that St. Catherine and the Lion has a bit of that too, saying, do you wonder why I'm riding a lion? It's because I'm a queen. Lions have to obey queens. And besides, it looks really cool.
Yeah, honour the king, the magistrate obey. Eric.
I was just going to say that I'm wondering whether he got more money for this, for I think 1632. I can't remember. Yeah,
we are in 1632. Yes.
Yes. Because he kind of we're already on the fourth show by land, whereas in the other one I think we only had like 3 or there isn't like a specified number, unless I missed that, which is entirely possible.
We had 3 and a recycled 4. Last time, so 4 or 5 in practice because they reused stuff on the water. So it's about the same number. Anyway, we need to move on and complete this. So I'm going to ask Liza to describe the 4th show. Eric, if you can read the speech coming up. We may be hitting some problematic text. We may not. We shall see. I'll ask Rachel to read the description of the 5th show by land, and Angela to read the speech, and then I'll divvy up the last bits at the when we get to them.
The 4th show by land. The Right Honourable the Lord Mayor in present, though free of this worshipful company of the haberdashers, at whose sole charge the high solemnity of this day is celebrated, yet was by profession a mercer, and his chief trading was in Florence for satins, taffeties, and sarcenets, in Lucca for taffeties and sarcenets, in Genoa for Genoa velvets, damasks, etc., in Bologna for satins, cypress, and sarcenets, also in Pisa. Now, because the materials of which these stuffs are made are brought from the farthest remote countries upon the backs of camels, mules, dromedaries, and elephants, I made choice of this beast especially, of whose incomparable strength and most pregnant understanding, if any desire to be fully satisfied, I must refer them to Pliny, Gesner, but more essentially to Don Sebastian de Covarrubias Orozco en el Tesoro de la Lengua Castellana, from whom Minshaw borrowed his etymological Spanish dictionary. Upon the word elephant, where are diverse stories of them, which, but for the gravity of the author, might almost appear incredible. The elephant is guided by an Indian. Upon his back is a fair castle furnished with change and variety of objects, etc. The speech delivered by the Indian as followeth.
No beast of all the wilderness can want like strength or wisdom with the elephant. And therefore, if considered well, none may better become the triumphs of the day. What hieroglyphic can a man invent, emblem or symbol for a government in this high nature, apter or more fit devised before, or to be thought over yet? He bears a castle, as this day we see, but of what strength and puissance must you be, supporting this great city? Who must lay your shoulders to burden, such as may make Atlas shrink beneath it? Temples, towers, rialtos, spacious mansions, suburb bowers, a weight to make the Hesperian giant droop, and Hercules who bore up heaven to stoop. Next, of what understanding, apprehension, what judgment, knowledge, wisdom, and retention, of what foresight, what body, what brain, what an Antimedon to guide the rein of steeds unmanaged, what a Palinar to steer this helm, and such a bark as sure in a sea troubled, where can be no trust in an inconstant surge or angry gust. Yet such an elephant we hope to find of you, in both ability of mind and strength of arm, by that encouragement the former passage of your life hath lent, showed in your judgment and experience, your gravity and unchanged temperance, all general virtues that become such state, behoveful in so great a magistrate. So after times unto your fame shall story how you have borne up in her pristine glory this flourishing city, not once sinking under so great a burden to successive wonder, since no skilled pilot could better command by sea or expert character by land.
The fifth show by land is the Scaturigo, or fountain of virtue, from which all arts and scientists are watered, and sciences are watered. I need not to spend time in the description thereof, it being able sufficiently to express itself, the nature thereof being in the poem laid open even unto the meanest capacity. There are 12 sundry persons to beautify the model, suiting with the number of the 12 companies as the saints that patronize them, and every of them a shield on their arm, bearing their several suchians, properly belonging to the halls. The speech from the fountain is thus delivered.
12 hours, twice told, distinguish night and day. 12 Caesars of the Julian line did sway Rome's empire, and in every case of strife, where actions tried, or if concerning life, 12 makes the jury full. The zodiac lines are likewise filed by 12 celestial signs, amongst which one in your emblazons born is numbered by the name of Capricorn. 12 Sibyls we account, and they foretold things happened since, although they spake of old by 12. The blessed word in the church instated was at the first divulged and propagated. 12 companies you are in chief, 12 here, present that number and those arms they bear. And hence the inundant Scaturigo grows, which through our kingdom's large dominions flows, by founded schools, by colleges, by trade, by traffic, by commerce, by project laid, for thrifty bargain and all competent gain, as well riding from the hand as brain. London, the mother and the fountain styled, and you of all her sons, now eldest child, heir to her great good works. Encourage still those pious acts, and by example fill void places with the like. And in this state you bear as being now chief magistrate. So order this your numerous charge, that they may God the King yourself serve and obey.
And Liza, I'll ask you to read the next paragraph before we get into the final bit. This is we've basically had the last chunk of stuff happening on Cheapside. We're about to go to the last speech at the end of the day.
A word or two considering the supporters of the arms of this worshipful company. Parmenisius, a Greek author, thus relates, King Melisius, who ruled in Crete, had 2 daughters, to whom Jupiter in his infancy was sent to be nursed to preserve him from the fury of his father Saturn. But they, being at that time dry-breasted, caused him to suck of a goat, called Amalthea, by whose milk he was nourished till the time that he came to be weaned. This goat usually brought forth 2 twins. Jupiter, after in requital of so great a benefit received by her, translated her among the stars. This goat is that Capricornus, one of the 12 celestial signs. The 2 kids, her twins, placed in the heavens also, were first observed by the great astrologer Cleostrates Tenadius. The last speech at night is delivered by Arion, which is a short commemoration of the former passages of the day's triumph in these words following.
And Rachel, if you would reprise the role, please.
Now hath the sun put off his golden beams, watering his hot steeds in cold Ister streams, and tired with his day's travel in the west, took up his inn. But ere you go to rest, remember what Arion still proclaims, in the due honor of the noble Thames. Next, how your queen-like saint directs the way, for you to rule, for others to obey. Then to be called love's son you have the grace, and that in Perseus figured is your place, that in this able elephant's implied, your strength to bear, your judgment to decide. Last, that you are the spring and fountain made, to water every science, art, and trade. Observing those, your honor shall shine bright, and so a happy and most blessed good night.
I come last to the artist, the modeller and composer of these several pieces, Master Jared Christmas, of whom see Parius component magnificent, as Augustus Caesar, speaking of Rome, boasted that he found it of brick, but he left it built of marble. So he who found these pageants and show of wicker and paper, rather appearing monstrous and prodigious births than any beast presented in them in the least kind imitating nature, hath reduced them to that solidity and substance for their materials, that they are so far from one day's washing to deface them, that the weathering of many winters cannot impeach them, and for their excellent figures and well-proportioned lineaments, by none preceding him, that could be said to be paralleled. In regard, therefore, there be so many strangers of all countries, and such as can judge of workmanship, come to be spectators of these annual triumphs, I could wish that the undertaking thereof might be hereafter conferred for the honour of the city upon men likeable and sufficient. For his own particular, I conclude hunc aliquis vix imitando supere potest finis. Yes, lots of stuff there. Once again, very little detail about what's going on in the pageant. A lot of stuff about the background to the stuff, but not a lot of detail. This elephant, guided by an Indian, upon the back of the elephant, a fair castle furnished with change and variety of objects. And that's an interesting speech. We are always slightly worried when we have text like this, whether we're going to be hitting stuff that is terribly problematic. But actually, the speech seemed quite good on the whole, and it depends on how the Indian was personified. But we're not hitting text that is doing work that is slightly more worrying. I don't know if I missed anything. Do correct me if I am wrong, Angela.
I agree with you, and I think one of the things that's really noticeable about these two pageants is the kind of internationalism of the descriptions. You know, that it's much, you got a sense earlier in the century that there was a kind of imagined international audience, but there wasn't really one. Whereas here, you're really getting the sense that there really is an awareness of outside, and particularly the bit where he talks about, you know, we don't favour our own people. How unlike Brexit Britain. We don't favour our own people. You know, we are kind of open to everybody. Everybody has a fair crack of the whip and so on. And I don't know, Tracey might know this because I don't. When does the new exchange get built? Is that a long time after? Or like
no, I think it's 1609, isn't it? Because Johnson wrote some verses for it. I think it's early Jacobean.
All right, because there's a fantastic discussion of it by a historian called Natasha Glacier. That is definitely set in these sorts of decades, and about how what an incredibly busy and international, global, really, place that it was. But perhaps I'm overplaying the period.
I think yes, it's an I. Yeah, that's a good guess, wasn't it? I think what's happening here is, as much as anything else, is that Heywood is very kind of happy to kind of give details about the trading links that these Lord Mayors have and the way that they trade with various nations and so on. And the source of their wealth isn't kind of disguised or sort of just like mystified. It's quite, talking about, he goes, this does even more later into the 30s actually. But yeah, there's that happening. I think the merchants, the oligarchs are a long way away from their trades now. They really are just merchants. They're just not artisans in any way, shape or form.
We've also got a sort of stuff to do with the zodiac and using the number 12 and playing around with these ideas there. I don't know if anyone has anything on that. I never do. So, Eric.
I was going to say he forgot to mention the 12 gods of Olympus, but I figured that might be a bit too pagan for him.
Also, how many 12s are there?
Oh, loads. It's a multiple of 3, so
Oh yes, there's a reason why base 12 works. Is a very effective unit to work from. Anyway,
I was just
able to do the 12 times table. The shilling was made of 12 pennies. So but he doesn't mention those either.
It's the Great 12 livery companies, really. I think that's the main reference.
Tying all these things together. Other thoughts, Angela?
I have a question, which is, it sounds as if Christmas isn't coming back. Is this his last do?
It's not. I just checked actually. It's his penultimate one. He does a 33 show, 33 show rather. Then he dies. Then his sons take over. But he may well have, he's getting on. I think maybe Heywood is kind of giving him a last hurrah, but he does manage to eke it out for another year.
Yeah, or maybe he intended to retire and then they were stuck for someone for the next year and just offered him a lot of money to do one more.
That's possible too. Yeah, which company was it in 33? 33. It was the
cloth workers.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Yes, just reading through Pageantry and Power by
Professor
Tracey Hill. I am not paid for any of these recommendations. It is, frankly, a very useful book to be looking at for this particular thing. But I mean, Christmas has been, doing this for over a decade pretty solidly, with the odd exception. It's going back to 1619 is his earliest. So he's been 15 odd years on and off. He's doing a lot of stuff. Liza, you're muted.
I was just reading just that last paragraph about Christmas, about Gerard Christmas, the one we've been talking about. And I'm reading it for tech hints. And I do like he who found these pageants and shows of wicker and paper. So that gives us a clue as to how these figures used to be constructed. They either paper or vellum stretched over wicker, or maybe some kind of paper mache. But now they and then we have. He had reduced them to that solidity and substance for the materials that they are so far from one day's washing to deface them, which again, if it rains on your paper mache sculpture, you're kind of screwed. That the weathering of many winters cannot impeach them. And here we've all been wondering whether they reuse these devices and figures, and I think this is a testimony that they do reuse them. Perhaps he makes them out of plaster now, and the paint is probably some kind of enamel with varnish, some kind of waterproof varnish over it to make it more durable. Or maybe it's easier to repaint a figure than to build a whole new one. Yeah. So anyway, he found it sort of paper mache and pasteboard, and he's built these props that keep getting reused, and in succeeding years they'll be like, oh yeah, Gerard Christmas built this seahorse.
He built seahorses to last. All of these things are objects that we're seeing every year, in some, or on and off. So yeah, there must be a terrifying storehouse somewhere where you go in.
They built them in. They tended to build them in the church at Christchurch, Greyfriars, because it was enormous. And I do that. Garrett Christmas actually asked if he could keep the seahorse and the sea lion from the 1629 show, because he was so proud of them.
Oh, did they say
That's so cool.
Yeah, and they kept the ostrich, of course, which survives in Ironmonger's Hall. I've seen it. I've touched it. It's amazing. With a Carrot Christmas. He also carved a statue of Charles I in Aldersgate in early 1630s as well. It was very sought after.
So what were the materials? What were the materials of the one that you touched?
The ostrich is wood.
That's intriguing. I mean, like I said, I've been guessing plaster, but wood would be even more durable.
He's a carver, really. So yeah, I think you're probably looking at wood for quite a lot of these things.
So Eric, we're reaching we're very much into extra time here. So any final thoughts from the room? Do start pitching them in, Eric.
Just so many references to things without a translation. I think it's like partly I've been spoiled by what do you call it, like having the Latin in plays where they immediately translate it into English because people don't get it when it's read out.
Oh, read a book, man. Read a book.
Hey,
haven't you got your Seneca on standby?
I have ancient Greek. Thank you very much. Here's my dictionary. Not sponsored.
Oh my God, unsolicited, getting your dictionary out on Zoom. I'm traumatized now.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Like that he comes over as a really grumpy lecturer. I mean, that is kind of like pretty much how he's coming over, isn't he? He sounds like lecturers are feeling right now, because they're all grumpy as hell from having been on Zoom for so long.
Well, yeah, I have to say, I'm feeling quite at home in this with this in the sense of it is reminding me a bit of Monday, some of Anthony Monday's better moments. There's some really interesting stuff coming out. So I'm going to close down the session. If you have additional thoughts, throw it at me while I waffle on for just a moment. So these are the first two that we've had. We have more to come over the next few sessions. Hopefully, we will sustain to the end of our Lord Mayor Show's sessions. We are approaching the end. We're running out of texts, it is slightly frustrating that actually, even though these are much better laid out in terms of the way they give us data about what happens, it's all in chronological order, but the absence of certain kinds of details is quite frustrating. And there's a lot of stuff I wish was here, but which it looks quite clear that Heywood is not going to tell us. And he's not going to do that. All that remains is to thank all these wonderful people for all their wonderful words, for their wonderful cats. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. Some spitting fire, others vomiting water.